Good morning. For many of us, it is back to school week for those of us with kids, which is an exciting time. For our kids, it's exciting and might also be a little nerve wracking. Last year was anything but normal for our kids. They had come off a year where school had ended suddenly. And for many of our kids, they were in school wearing masks. Maybe they were not wearing masks, but it definitely was an unusual year for both kids and parents. And so this year, they're facing a year of uncertainty going back into school, maybe not knowing what to expect. We certainly, as adults, are seeing a lot of divisiveness in our country, maybe in local communities. And so I want to share with you just a few tips for all of us to help our kids transition back into school. For some kids, it's a breeze, and for others, they may need a little extra help and support. Some of the issues that some of our kids are facing are things surrounding last year. Most of our kids, they had their same spot they sat by, the same kids that they interacted with throughout the years, regardless of whether they were wearing masks or not. So now the challenge is all of our kids may be back together. How might they fit in with each other? New peer groups, which happen every year. And this year, that's going to be even a little bit more intensified. So for some kids, that creates some stress, some anxiety. The inability to know what to expect, whether your kids are just starting out in school or maybe they've been attending for a while, there's no predictability. And that's something that our kids have really had to learn the hard way, is not knowing what to expect. Kids really need that to feel safe. Our kids haven't had that for some time. This year, we don't know what that's going to look like. And that can be very unsettling. So that's another piece that can create some nervousness with our kids. And then we're going to have some kids who will probably be wearing masks and others who will not be. It's really important that we help prepare our kids to teach them kindness and love and tolerance all the way around, and for us to be able to model that. I think the biggest thing that we can do with kids who may be experiencing some stress with all of that is to normalize it, to open the door for it. Some kids are really good about talking about feelings, and some kids don't. So I think to assume that if your child isn't talking about any nerves or anxiety around that they're not having it, is probably a mistake. So I would encourage you to open the door, to ask your child how they're feeling about it. If they say, oh, it's fine. Okay, well, are you having any nerves about going back to school? What that might look like? To share, I remember when I went back to school, it might be a little stressful, or I used to have some nerves about it. Can open the door for your child to really talk about what they might be experiencing. If they are feeling upset, if they're expressing some anxiety about it, one of the things that can be really helpful to say is, let's think about some ways that I can make that easier for you. You have to go to school. That's your job as a child. That's the law. So that has to happen. But what are some ways I can help make it easier for you? Ways that I can support you. Thinking about things that they liked about school, trying to help them focus on the positive pieces. And then the other thing is, if they just say, well, I just don't like school. What is it in particular that they're struggling with? Does it have to do around the whole mask situation? Some kids felt really comfortable with that they had their spot, their group of peers that they had to interact with. Some kids fell behind in learning, and so they may be nervous about that depending on their age group. So find out what the specific concern is and then work with them on problem solving. The other thing I would encourage is that we don't just find the solutions for them, but work with them around that. The other key piece that is really important that us as parents need to convey is that we are confident, that we believe in them. So I see you're anxious, but I believe in you and you will get through this. not minimizing their feelings, because again, we have to remember, regardless of how ridiculous we might think it is, for them, that's their whole world. Just like the things we experience at our age is our whole world. Routines, you hear maybe professionals talking about that. It really makes a difference for kids. Bedtimes, getting up at the same time, trying to, get them to eat something for breakfast, which I know in our household is next to impossible, but I still try. So routines are really important and will help. And giving kids some choice, small things really do help give them a sense of control, which is helpful to them throughout the day. So whether it's depending on their age, here's 3 different choices you have for clothing. They're wearing uniforms, a little more difficult. Here's 3 choices for breakfast. Which one do you want? I know it sounds kind of crazy, but when they feel like they have some sense of control, it makes a difference for them. The last thing I want to touch on is typical anxiety that kids of all ages experience versus when it might become problematic and when you might need to intervene or maybe seek some professional intervention. Most of us experience different anxiety at different points in our lives. It's sometimes on a daily basis when things come up. So do kids. So typical, there's a reason. Starting school. If you have a test coming up, you might be nervous about that, have some anxiety. What that can lead to is maybe with some kids with typical anxiety, they might be reluctant to ask a teacher for help because they're nervous. They don't want to be embarrassed. Or maybe they're nervous about going on a field trip and they're not going to have anybody to sit by on the bus. So they're going to be alone. Those are some normal things, and it can lead to maybe they're reluctant to ask the teacher for help for the test. Different things like that. Those are some normal things that can happen, which would be typical. And those are things that as parents, we can help our kids with. We can problem solve. Well, maybe you can ask the teacher after class for help or to reassure them that that's normal. All kids need help at time. To reassure them and work through those things with them, or problem solve on the field trip that you can talk to somebody ahead of time about where to sit. So it's important to reassure them, don't minimize that, but it does not interfering in their life. When it gets to be more problematic, they're anxious more times than they're not. It actually is interfering in their ability to maybe function at school because they're preoccupied with it. During the day, they can't focus on things. Maybe it's actually keeping them from participating in sports. So they're not even going out, or they're sick the day of the field trip because they just don't want to face it. So when those sorts of things start happening, those are things you want to pay attention to. And that might mean you need more formal intervention, whether it's talking to your school counselor, whether it's getting more professional help, just some red flags as parents you want to be aware of. So we at Catholic Charities hope you all have wonderful school years. Please remember that we're always here, whether it's just a question that you might have, a concern, or if you or your loved one need to talk with one of us for counseling, we're here for you. And you can reach us. All of our sites are listed on our website at cathchar.com, cathchar.com. Thanks.